talk,
identity,
and access
management.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How's it going, bud?
You're good. Yourself?
Good, good. Hey, I just wanted to kind of mention I've been getting a lot of LinkedIn requests lately to connect to people who've been listening to the podcast, which I think is absolutely awesome. And I want to encourage anybody who listens, who wants to network with myself and Jeff to, feel free. Don't feel bashful about sending those LinkedIn requests because we are open to networking with all of our fellow IAM practitioners. And I think most of our guests from the conversations we've had, they're open to that as well. So if you're somebody that you're interested in what they have to say and you want to network with them, I think, I can't speak for everybody, but I think that would be a pretty safe bet to send them a LinkedIn request.
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy to get those too. And, it's gratifying, obviously, to hear that people are listening and enjoying the show. And if people have ideas for topics, etc., go ahead and hit us up on, LinkedIn, or you can visit us on the web at identitycenter.com. We've got a contact page there that goes right to us, so we can, hopefully craft some messaging and some stories and some topics for what people want to hear. So with that said, I think today is a perfect example of where we're going to have a conversation with a like-minded soul whose goal is to educate and share his experience in building IAM programs at work. I want to welcome to the show Jerrod Brennen. He is a music teacher and an all-around IAM Renaissance man. Welcome, Jerrod.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jim. I'm glad to have a chance to talk with you guys this morning.
So we're happy to have you on here because the way that I think today's show is going to kind of run is really just kind of a conversation around a few different topics. And, our traditional opening salvo when we have a guest on is to talk a little about their IAM background and how they get into it and whether IAM chose you or you chose IAM. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, how you got started in the IAM world.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. I joke with folks that I've earned every single gray hair in my beard, and I'm keeping them as long as I can. But I wasn't somebody who picked identity or even InfoSec or even IT intentionally when I was younger. I went to school for music education. I've been playing piano and guitar and trumpet and singing for my entire life. And I thought, yeah, this would be a fun career until I did my student teaching experience. That's when I learned about helicopter parents and when I learned about the bureaucracy that goes hand in hand with a lot of public school systems. My wife ended up teaching. She taught for a number of years. She's still actively engaged in the school, and she's a saint. She, I think, is much better suited for managing that audience and that crowd. I'm pretty sure I would have been fired within my first year for speaking my mind or saying something that the administration or parents didn't want to hear. So I have this love for teaching, and my wife and I wanted to start a family. And as I was looking for opportunities with this college degree in music ed, what could I do to actually build a career in a field that I was interested in? Now, the other piece to being a musician is I've always been a nerd. My comic book collection is stellar. And I've been playing around with programming since my aunt let me toy around on her Apple IIe back in the day. So this notion of maybe I could give this IT thing a shot turned into a job setting up training classes where I would load up this van full of these 21-inch monitors, the old CRTs, right? And I'd have to drive all around and set up training classes in hotels and then come back at the end of the week and pick them up. And it was a chance for me to study and get a couple of certs. I picked up my A+, my MCP, and then I leveraged that to get a help desk job where I went back and took some classes at a Franklin University here in Columbus to round out some of my computer science knowledge. And then I leveraged that help desk job to get an IT job with a public utility that needed somebody to do EDI, the whole electronic data interchange, sending data to and from companies that we worked with and banks. And just so much of my job there was related to security setting up encrypted transfers of very sensitive data. And internally, they posted a job to hire somebody to be on the corporate cybersecurity team. So there was corporate, and then there was SCADA, the one that touched all the power plants and that piece. And when I got in the interview, and not a joke, the manager said, "Do you understand how to do command line Unix stuff?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's all I've been doing for the past few years." She said, "Perfect, you're hired." So knowing command line was enough to get me my very first InfoSec gig. And from there, I actually had a job at an opportunity come up with a very large retailer who at $4 billion in annual revenue decided, maybe we should hire somebody to look at this security thing. And so I was the first full-time dedicated InfoSec hire there, part of a compliance organization. And they didn't really hire me to do security. They hired me to do PCI, so credit card security, because they were going to get charged more per credit card transaction if they couldn't demonstrate compliance. And hiring me was actually cheaper than all those fees. So when I was there, without really letting anybody know what I was doing, I built out an ISO 27000 series based InfoSec program, not formally certified, but enough that I felt I was doing right by people and customers and employees and everybody who needed security, whether or not they knew it. And that's when I got into identity. It wasn't so much my choice, but I had it thrust upon me. This would have been 2008 with the financial crash. We were in the middle of an identity program deployment. We'd selected a vendor. We had an architect. He had a team of consultants. And the powers that be said, look, all the consultants, they're done. 2 weeks and they're out. And the architect, Jerrod, he now works for you. And you guys are going to finish building, and then you're going to run this identity program for the entire company. So you're talking a few thousand home office employees, about 3 times that in warehouse workers. And then when you look at the retail outlets, hundreds of thousands of identities coming in and going out of that system every year. And the infrastructure itself was, I think, 50 servers, some physical, some virtual, because this was early in the virtual space. So I joke that in the 4 years I worked at that company, I got 12 years of experience. And when my kids started yelling stranger danger when I walked in at the end of the day, I knew it was maybe time to move to something a little less demanding of my time. So I took that experience, moved into consulting, did that for a number of years, back into higher education for a bit, which I absolutely love. And then another consulting job actually led me here, because over time, as I'm doing this stuff hands-on and I'm teaching other people how to do it in these consulting engagements, I started reaching out to local ISSA chapters, ISACA, ISC Squared didn't really have the chapter footprint yet, but I did work with OWASP, and I was teaching these people about InfoSec and AppSec and identity, and taking that teaching passion and applying it in a kind of a volunteer, look, here's how I learned. Here, I took my lumps. Let me save you a little bit of that pain and suffering and help you get where you want to go more quickly. And that opened up an opportunity for me to make a move into the vendor space, which now I consider myself in that trifecta where I've done enterprise, I've done consulting, and now I get to talk to all the other nerds who are actually building this stuff and making it work, and just light years ahead of me and what they know in terms of the underpinnings. But it's been a wild ride, and I'm grateful every day that I get to do that teaching, that it's come full circle, that I get to do the thing that makes me happy, but I do it in a way that's it's beneficial to our customers, it's beneficial to our company, it's beneficial to the customers who are relying on these services and just expect this security stuff to work without understanding all the stuff that goes into like building an identity program and making that smooth as silk. And then, the other thing that drives me right now is I look at the number of people I know who've been impacted by layoffs, by people who are suddenly finding themselves working for companies that are having to tighten their budgets and cut back on both open positions and current positions. One of the things that I've found is that organizations that get this identity stuff right have more stability. They have more, ultimately it's a longevity, because they're taking these risks, they're taking these costs, and they're managing them well by just giving people the ability to do what they were hired to do. And so for me, I think this identity stuff is also kind of turned into how do I help people stay employed? So yeah, like I said, it's been a crazy journey to get here. And I know from other InfoSec pros that I've talked to, like one of my best friends in pen testing got his start as a prison guard. And he's my go-to guy. I got a talk I do where I reference things I saw this guy pull all the time. And it's that flip side of identity, right? It's how do people exploit it?
Oh, I think being a prison guard definitely helps you think like the bad guy, right? And I think that's a big part when it comes to pen testing. And really, it's one of my core beliefs within the IAM world is that you have to be able to think like the adversary.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Jim. This guy too, and Mike, if you're listening, I'm calling you out, man. I am so glad he's on our side, because he's got skills and knowledge, and I think he sells himself short with what he's capable of. He's smart as hell. But yeah, if you have the ability to look at your identity program from a criminal's perspective, right? How could I make this go wrong? How could I abuse access? If you look at every data breach, major data breach that we've seen over the past 10 plus years, identity centric security has been an issue, right? Getting identity right would have either mitigated or prevented the damage that we're still reeling from with these breaches.
So I'd say from your story, the fantastic story is that IAM definitely picked you. And I
Yeah.
definitely picked you. And I think your story is just so typical of many of the IAM practitioners that I know that listen to our podcast, that Jeff and I are, right? We started out in some other area and kind of worked our way into IAM. And IAM gives you, it's such a fantastic industry. I mean, I'm looking around right now at what's going on in our economy with the COVID and everything. And, more people are working from home. That just makes identity and access management that much more important. And so I think it's an industry where, if you're not in it already, you're probably not listening to the podcast. But if you are in it, I think you made a great choice because it gives you so many other opportunities. And I think what I'm hearing from you, Jerod, is that you've been able to kind of parlay that with, where your strengths are to become an educator within this space. And I think that that's just, one type of option that would be available. Everybody has the option to, or the opportunity to kind of play from their strength. One of the things that, I picked up on as you were talking, and again, around that thinking like the adversary was, I'd call you kind of a hacker. And
Yep.
yeah. So I know you have a presentation you put together on that, but maybe you could talk a little bit about your hacking without getting into too much detail on the hacking side. But I mean,
Yeah.
your webinar that you've got coming up on hacking identity. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Jim. In multiple roles I've held throughout my career. In the enterprise roles, I was building out pen testing teams and training up people to do pen testing internally. When I was consulting, pen testing was a good portion of my day job. And I do participate in bug bounty programs on the DL, right? I do a little bit of dabbling when I have time, but what I did early on in my teaching and speaking, I've been doing presentations for 10 plus years now in conferences and online. And I put together a talk based on my pen testing experience, helping people to map this notion of, well, what do attackers really do? Whether it's a pen tester or cyber criminal, if they want to get in, it's not always, that super sexy exploit code that they wrote in Python, or it's not an O day, and it's not, even I've been on pen tests where we don't even fire up Metasploit, right? And I know that's sacrilege to all the OSCPs out there, but honestly, if I could password spray an internet-facing web or service interface that lets me get one set of creds, once I'm in, it's just kid in a candy store. We did a pen test once where we got in with a set of creds. Password spraying attack gave us 3 sets of credentials to a single factor VPN. So they didn't have MFA enabled, right? That's check mark right there. But once we got in, they had 0 controls around that identity internally. And we took a contractor account, went to a company all file share, found a human resources folder where the HR team had been storing information on every employee and contractor for the last 5-6 years, and pillaged that right away. And when I say information, I'm talking socials, driver's license, passport. We had enough to end the pen test right then. And that was within 2 hours of starting the test. So it's like Monday morning at 8 o'clock, we kicked things off. And by 10 o'clock, it was well before lunchtime, we had enough that we could say, yeah, this is a big deal. But it was a week-long engagement, and we ended up taking their VM infrastructure. We got in, we started pulling machines and did some physical pen on site, but ended up with enough information to say, yeah, if an attacker was really going to focus their efforts on you, it wouldn't be very difficult for them to virtually destroy your business. They could take it offline, they could launch a ransomware attack, they could steal information and then extort you for money. I mean, the laundry list of the business impacts was tremendous. Then it all goes back to this notion of, if you can exploit a weakness in someone's identity control set, that's the first domino to fall. That's how the majority of attackers are getting in and doing damage. And so this talk I've got, hacking identity, has step by step, right? It's stories and things I've done directly and things other pen testers have done. It shows you the tools we use, the techniques we use, and then it gives you some guidance on how to mitigate those attacks.
The thing I was going to say, Jerrod, is that, one of my points I like to make is that if I was a hacker and I was able to get into your VPN and then start accessing data, I'm not going to then spike the ball in your face and let you know that I've actually exploited your network, right? I'm going to do it for as long as I can until you figure it out, or I've hit that honeypot of, credit card numbers or something like that. And you think back to the Target breach. I mean, it was sophisticated on one level, but it was unsophisticated on a whole other level, which is, that I got a VPN account and I was able to get onto your network. Wow, now your perimeter is worthless.
Yeah, and that's a good example too. I've actually talked to some folks who were involved in that incident. I taught a workshop on third-party risk management at a conference for MIS Training Institute. And we had a couple of guys in there and just turned it into a conversation. And that's a good team there. I mean, they were in the middle of a FireEye deployment. It was actually detecting things, but it's a representation of what we're all up against, right? There's so many expectations and responsibilities put on cybersecurity teams that it's difficult, even with all that information at hand, to respond, right? To be able to comb through all the alerts and determine what's a false positive and what you should act on. But getting back, right, if you can get leadership engaged and investing in doing identity right, you get the preventative value of the security controls. So you're not spinning your wheels and taxing your team down the line trying to chase after all these, well, maybe that was an incident, all these alerts and all these events. But you also get a financial benefit to the company, that's an important message. That's one that took me way too long to learn. I used to come into every security conversation talking about, we need to do this because it's going to prevent a breach. And here's the security value. No, we need to do this because it's going to enable us to move into different markets and move through M&A activity more quickly and enable us to contain the cost of what we're doing in our cloud environments. And there's also this security benefit, right? You got to talk their language and still deliver the same message. But Yeah, that Target one was a big deal, but the one that sticks in my craw really is the Marriott breach, because the attackers, to your point, Jim, they camped out for 4 freaking years. That which you look at that and you're like, how in the hell did these guys not detect that they had somebody on their network for 4 years? Well, because an attacker is not going to spike the ball in your face, just like you said. They're not going to throw up a flag and say, hey, look at what I did. They're going to camp out, right? It's privilege escalation and lateral movement once you get in. But then when you're in, you're looking for some sort of persistence. You want to set up a couple of backdoors and a couple of credential sets that just sit there quiet until you need them. And as long as you're checking in and exfiltrating data and being, I'm not encouraging anybody to be a criminal here, by the way, but if you're being smart about your data exfiltration and about selling that information on the dark web and the deep web, you're able to get away with that because, security teams are just trying to keep up with so much that, the value of getting this stuff right from a preventative standpoint, to me, is just, it's this big flashing neon light that I'm trying to help executives understand better. I think the security teams, I know they get it. The people outside of InfoSec, the people outside of IT, we're still working on that messaging to get better about helping them understand it as well.
It's the quiet ones you got to watch out for, right? so, so you talked a little bit about identity-centric security.
Yeah,
For the folks out there who may not be as familiar with that term, how do you describe that?
it's surrounded, unfortunately, by a lot of marketing and buzzwords, and I just accept that as par for the course if you're working in IT and InfoSec. But the most common way I've heard it described, Jeff, is the firewall was like the old perimeter, where everybody did all their work inside a computer network, and you could just put up this perimeter to say, look, only people who are supposed to be in here are the ones we're letting in, and we're going to block everybody else. And as technology continues to evolve and we introduce things like laptops, which give employees portability, we introduce wireless networks, which enhance that portability. Then we start creating smartphones and tablets. When the iPhone 3 or 3GS dropped, to me, that was one of the biggest catalysts to what we're seeing in identity-centric security today, because now people don't have to sit at their desk at a workstation doing their job. And as all this technology is advancing, we've got Amazon Web Services, we've got Google Cloud, we've got Microsoft Azure, where people are able to deploy things as a service outside of that data center. And now, instead of me as a business user submitting a request to IT to say, hey, I need an app that does a thing, I can just go out and sign up for it. I may or may not have to use a credit card to sign up for it. So procurement may not even know that I'm putting corporate data out in this cloud service. And as all of this change has occurred, that mindset of we're just going to protect the network perimeter, it's dissipated. It's not a reasonable approach anymore. And we've got people, I know Kinderberg, when he published the white paper on zero trust, really hit home with a lot of people to say, we've got to take a different approach. We've got to look at how we're securing data differently. And so I've heard it referred to as data-centric security and identity-centric security. But it's really about what are we trying to protect, which I think it goes beyond data to systems, and especially when it comes to administrative interfaces, that's a big deal, privileged accounts. But looking at the identities that have access to resources or entitlements, whether it's a data set or whether it's a function or whether it's, like I said, an admin console, and figuring out at that identity level, are we doing right? Are we protecting that identity appropriately with things like MFA and strong credentials and password rotation or whatever the current NIST recommendations are? And then are we controlling the entitlements well, what that identity has the ability to do? Are we watching what that identity is doing so that we build a baseline of what normal looks like? So when we see this privileged account log in from a foreign IP that it's never logged in from before at 3:00 in the morning, we can maybe flip an alert to say, hey, somebody check this out. Or more importantly, automate all of that. Take that true DevOps, the full CI/CD pipeline mentality, and apply that to what you're doing with identity and say, look, if something like that happens, I'm just going to go into some sort of central system and say, wait a minute, let's turn stuff off. Let's alert somebody to take a look and let me know whether or not this is okay. And then we'll turn things back on. So many ways to mitigate these risks if you start looking at your security program from that identity centric view through that lens instead of the old way of doing things.
And now here you are on the Identity at the Center podcast talking about the identity centric security. So I think I think Jeff nailed it. Like-minded thinker. And one of the things I think you're also showing that I think is just so important as an identity practitioner to become a leader in this space is to be able to talk intelligently about what's out there, map it back to business outcomes. I find that, so I got locked into your YouTube channel, and I think that's one of the things that we want to make sure that everybody knows is out there, and talk a little bit about what are some of the other talks that you're doing beyond the hacking identity. So maybe you can give us kind of each of those talks in like a brief minute or two on what you talk about in each one of those so that people have an idea. And then we'll put in the show notes, we'll put a link out to your YouTube channel so people can get out there and get more if they're interested.
I really appreciate that. That's first and foremost, shout out to Adrian Crenshaw. For anybody who doesn't know Adrian, he goes as Iron Geek on Twitter, IronGeek_ADC. So Adrian made it a point when we were doing conferences in person to travel around with gear and record talks at B-Sides events, at ISSA events, and then publish them so people who couldn't attend the conference in person would still have access to that content. And a lot of the videos you're talking about, Jim, are ones that Adrian recorded. The first one is that hacking identity talk, where it's all about helping people understand why identity is such a big deal, why getting it right matters. I've done it, gosh, I don't even know how many times at this point, but I'm really fortunate. The Identity Defined Security Alliance is letting me do that talk coming up soon on their Bright Talk channel, where I get to talk about not just the why it's important, but map it back to some of the work they're doing with their framework. But after that, that why talk, that hacking identity, I do a talk called The Path to Identity Maturity, where I talk about how you can apply the capability maturity model. This is the Department of Defense, Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute maintained 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 model. Apply that to your identity program, but don't limit your controls to what you find in FISMA, right? NIST 853, or what you find in PCI, or what you pull out of HIPAA or SOX control sets, right? Don't make it this minimalistic compliance approach to identity. Now, the Identity Defined Security Alliance is a framework that identifies upwards of 30 best practices. It is hands down the best identity resource that we have today. Well, goes hand in hand with ID Pro's body of knowledge. What they're doing over there is amazing. But for a practitioner trying to figure out, well, how do I even measure my program? And how do I bring some of this language in so that everybody within my organization can be talking about the same thing, right? How do I get around these miscommunications and help people see the value from their point of view? This idea of doing a maturity self-assessment by using the capability maturity model and the Identity Defined Security Alliance framework. I've done it at dozens of organizations over the past couple of years, and without fail, they see instant benefit. And oh my God, I wish we had done this sooner, because now we can go forward and figure out projects and how can we start making changes, which is the next talk I do. That's my building an identity program talk. I've got one that's it's fairly tactical. It's kind of a series of 6 cyclical steps you want to go through to start achieving quick wins, which is crucial in the identity space. Do not go in and try to deploy this big multi-million-dollar program over the course of 3 years, right? If you ask budget, or ask the C-level execs to give you budget for the next 3 years as you deploy this program, and you're going to show value 3 years out, you are going to lose their support within 90 days. The very first time something comes up that they need budget, they'll look at what you're doing and say, well, it sounded good, but we're not seeing any results. So in my building a program talk, I help people understand what some of those quick wins are and how you can demonstrate value iteratively. And this is the mindset of prototyping. There's a TED talk on prototyping that's just mind blowing about building towers out of popsicle sticks and marshmallows. I'll share it in the show notes. It's been it was eye opening for me in how I did my job in InfoSec and identity with this notion of I don't have to get it all right out of the gate, right? I can do a little bit at a time. I can make something work. I can show value to the people I'm asking to invest time and resources. And then I can go back and say, all right, now I'm ready to do the next thing. At which point they'll say, yeah, we really love what you did last time. What do you have for us next? I've seen that in my enterprise roles where people would literally walk up to my desk and say, hey, I heard you were doing this for this other team. Can you do that for us? And so I didn't have to go preach identity to them. They were coming to me to consume those services because of those quick wins and those success stories. So that building a program talk is giving people that tactical knowledge. And then I bleed into a talk called Developing Your Identity Strategy, which is looking ahead. This one's more for the C-level execs, for the directors, to say, what's on the horizon, right? What do I even need to be considering? There's a write-up from McKinsey Digital on digital identification that talks about this concept of self-sovereign identity and the role that self-sovereign identity is going to play in the global economy in the coming years. And the World Economic Forum, who has their own cybersecurity group, they published a white paper when they had their meetup in February in Davos, Switzerland, reimagining digital identity. That white paper is another one that gets you looking ahead and saying, wow, this isn't just a matter of automating password resets or giving people a self-service password reset portal, right? Digital identity is going to be fundamental to the success of businesses within the next decade. And if you don't have this stuff figured out, you are going to be the one lagging behind the competition who just has customers flocking to them because you're able to consume their self-sovereign identity in a way that you can provide services to it. You can provision entitlements to it. And so that strategy talk is helping people understand that, yeah, you've got to get this stuff right today because this is what's coming. And, it's just like people who are still hanging on to that firewall-centric perimeter security approach, right? You are going to be spending time and money on things that hold your business back. It is the quintessential definition of technical debt, to be hanging on to the old way of doing things. And when it comes to digital identity, it's not just getting it right within your four walls, right? It's not just getting it right with your SaaS services. It's how are you as a company going to participate in the global economy, given what's already coming, not theoretical, right? It is rapidly coming. So I share those talks in that order because they're different audiences, and you can't just jump right into that strategy talk if people don't understand why the hacking stuff matters, right? What are people doing to compromise it? But I've got those talks as they've been shared publicly out on my YouTube channel. I know SailPoint, who I'm working with, they actually had me deliver my building a program talk at their Navigate 2020 conference. And I believe they're going to publish that talk to their channel as well. But yeah, that playlist that I've got out there, Jim, the one that you mentioned, every time I have a new talk that becomes publicly available, I update that playlist because, again, it's that teacher in me. I've spent literally decades doing this stuff hands-on and learning, what works, what doesn't work, and looking ahead. I'm very much of that futurist mindset. So whatever I'm doing today has implications in the next few years. And I'm giving that knowledge away as fast as I can to anybody who wants it.
It's quite the syllabus that you've kind of put together here around identity. Have you looked at doing anything on platforms like LinkedIn Learning, which I know has been sort of come up quite a bit, especially during the pandemic, right? People at home looking to get new skills and training, et cetera. Are you doing anything on LinkedIn Learning?
Yeah, Jeff. LinkedIn as a platform in general has been one of the best resources for me as an educator. I can connect with so many people. And a few years back, they bought lynda.com so they could start doing this online learning. And I want to say it was 2018. I did a class on security essentials training, I think is what it's called. But it's really about helping people understand the difference between a risk assessment, a compliance assessment, a security assessment, a penetration test, and how you would execute each of those. And the folks there, Alyssa, my content producer, really dug not just what I was sharing, but kind of how I teach. And so she's been hitting me up since then to say, Jerrod, can you teach classes on application security? Can you teach classes on soft skills, right? Helping people who have a technical bend understand how to engage the business. And right now I'm in the middle of, I literally just this morning uploaded content for a CSSOP certification class for people doing application security, because AppSec and identity, they go hand in hand. So yeah, I continue to publish content out there. For folks listening, hit me up on LinkedIn and send me a message and tell me that you heard this podcast, and I'll send you a link that lets you take one of my classes for free. It's one of the benefits of being an instructor is I can hand those out when people hit me up. So yeah, it's a terrific platform. Not only do I publish content out there, but I'm watching courses all the time. There's a course from his last name's Reichenthal on everything as a service that he just published. That's in my queue because, boy, when it talks about identity and strategy and where we're going, the notion of how we're shifting to everything as a service is it's an important concept for people to get their heads around. Yeah, can't recommend LinkedIn Learning enough.
That's awesome. You know, Jerrod, I would say you are a sponge, right? You take all this information, you triangulate it, you turn it into a perspective, which I think is just an amazing skill. For our listeners who also consider themselves to be sponges, what I'd like to ask you now is, you know, do you have any recommendations for people who are in this space? You just gave a good one there, everything as a service, right? But what are some other things that you're using to what I like to call sharpen the saw?
Yeah, sure. Well, in addition to this podcast, number one, I was late to the game in learning about you guys, and I'm kicking myself over that because I look at who you've had on the show previously. Going through back episodes of this podcast is the amount of knowledge that you're going to get from the people speaking is just it's a masterclass in identity, and that's me excluded, right? I'm just Jerrod, but you got some real rock stars here who are doing some amazing things. So the Identity Defined Security Alliance, the work that they're doing, I know Jolie Smith, the director there, is driving that program forward. And for me, it's like the IDSA is to identity what OWASP is to application security, right? If you need a resource to help you figure out identity, the IDSA is publishing them as quickly as they can. And you can engage through their forums, you can get on their working groups. So the IDSA is another resource I'd hit up. ID Pro, the ID Pro body of knowledge, this group effort, crowdsourced effort to build out some in-depth identity information. I see the IDSA framework and the ID Pro BOK as this 1-2 punch that's going to be table stakes for identity professionals within the next few years. When you go to hire for an identity role, if you can speak to those two resources, your hiring manager will know right away, yeah, this person gets it. This person is somebody I want on my team. And then the other resource I'd share is the Free Code Camp YouTube channel. Because I think thinking like a programmer is just a crucial skill for anybody, ID, cybersecurity, InfoSec, whatever your gig is. Free Code Camp is publishing courses that you can take on their YouTube channel at zero cost. Good quality courses. I've taken a few of them just to help you build out that knowledge base. And I leverage them specifically to keep my Python skills fresh and to build up my cloud knowledge. Because the other advice I have for anybody in cybersecurity in general, or even with a narrow focus in identity, get some core cloud certifications. I'm not going to recommend any cert shop. I do, having been a hiring manager, it stands out to me if you've put the legwork in to do a cert before you show up to the interview. but the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner, the Azure Fundamentals course, the Google Cloud Engineer, the entry level, right? Anybody who has a fundamental understanding of the cloud and the relationship between on-prem and as a service technologies and how they play together, that's a fundamental skill already for identity professionals. So going out to the free code camp channel and taking some of their free certification classes is going to help you get to a point that you're ready to sit for the exam. And then whether you sit for the exam or not, you'll still have so much more knowledge about the overlap between cloud and identity that you can bring to your day-to-day. It's a great resource.
I know you've been, very generous with your time here. We want to start wrapping things up so we can let you get on with your day. Are there any other parting words of wisdom or comments that you want to throw out there for the, I don't want to say Identiverse because that's taken, but for the identity world?
Yeah, the one thing that I'd encourage everybody to go into this with, Jeff, is this identity stuff is doable. You can get it right, and you can do a really good job. You just have to be able to break it down and pick your sweet spot, and understand it's a team sport. You don't have to do everything, right? I'm a hockey fan, right? Big Go Jackets, right? Too bad they didn't make it through the playoffs, but rooting for them anyway. If you've got a whole team full of goalies on the ice, it's not going to be a very entertaining game, right? You got to have the team mixed up so that they can play the game well, and that's the same with identity, right? So if you like writing policies, great. If you're an extrovert and like talking to people, yeah, get involved in identity. That getting out and talking to people is the introverts like me, right? I'm exhausted if I have to have like a meeting with somebody to talk about this stuff. But you find your passion, you find your sweet spot, and engage because, like I said, there's so many resources available already. It's like standing on the shoulders of giants, right? We don't have to figure this out from scratch. We can tap into the resources out there and then just pick some quick wins, right? Just show the business, show the people that you're working with an incremental improvement and say, look, here's a taste of what we're able to do if we get this stuff right. Jump on board and we'll keep moving forward. We'll keep doing it. So just don't get overwhelmed, right? The support structure there's too. I know Jeff and Jim, you both said people can hit you up on LinkedIn. Please, I encourage people to do the same. I have conversations on LinkedIn with people about this stuff all the time, so find your tribe out there, find people who can answer your questions and just go into it with that mindset that, yeah, we'll figure this out because we will.
Yeah, I think it's really important is, there's a lot of good IM folks out there, whether it's LinkedIn, where it's, meetups, et cetera, people should feel free to get involved. It's a very welcoming community. So,
yeah.
Take advantage of folks that are out there, and even if you are more of an introvert, just listen, right? You can absorb a lot and show value other ways. So I think with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Jim, any final thoughts from your side?
The only final thought was, I think Jerrod pointed it out. We've had some really fantastic guests. I'm going to put Jerrod on that list as well. Thought leader in our space. And this has been a fantastic episode. So really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No, thank you guys. I love any chance I get to talk about this stuff and to share knowledge and to help people out. Again, that's a teacher in me. So, personally, I'm very grateful you gave me a chance to come here and talk.
Well, thanks for joining us. And don't forget to check out Jerrod on his next upcoming identity talk on, let's see, was that Thursday? September 3rd, I believe it is.
3rd, yeah. It'll be on the Identity Defined Security Alliance Bright Talk channel. So if you go to the IDS Alliance site, they'll have a link to it there. So
yep, if you go to that site, click calendar in the upper right there, you'll see it pop up right there, and I'll put a link to it as well in the show notes, along with a whole bunch of other links that that we'll have here as resources for people to be able to check out. So with that, we'll go ahead and close it out for the week. Appreciate everyone listening. Don't forget, you can visit us at identitycenter.com, and if you've got show ideas or things you'd like to see us tackle, don't hesitate to reach out, whether it's there or on LinkedIn, and then you can also find us on Twitter at IDAC Podcast. So with that, thanks for listening, and we'll talk with everyone in the next one. You've been listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. For more episodes, visit identityatthecenter.com.